In this guide, I'm going to briefly cover how to separate individual pieces of a Skyrim NIF in 3ds Max. I'll be assuming you've already installed the NIF plugin for 3ds Max and have the mesh available that you want to edit as well. First, we need to import our mesh, so click the Max button in the top left corner and select Import. Then find your mesh file and open it. The default import settings are usually fine and they should look something like this. The difficulty of slicing the mesh varies a lot by how its pieces were assembled by Bethesda. Some meshes only need a few clicks to break apart, and some, like this one, will take a little bit more effort. First, I'd like you to take a look at the far left panel. This lists the individual mesh objects and the bones. We only want the belt from this mesh, so we want to delete the default body object over here. Right-click the male underwear body and select Delete. Now we'll start disassembling the mesh. Click directly on it in the render window to highlight it for editing. On the top right panel, you should now have the mesh info displayed. A typical armor mesh consists of 3 parts by default. First is the dismember skin instance, which tells Skyrim which slot this armor uses, main body in the case of all chest armor. Next is the skin, which is where the bone weights or weight painting are saved and edited. And finally, the editable mesh, which controls the geometry of the mesh. This is the piece we'll be working with initially. To start, we want to find out if the belt is separated from the tunic or if it's all part of the same element. On the editable mesh menu on the right side of the screen, under Selection, click the box that represents Element. Now click or highlight the upper part of the mesh. As we can see here, the belt is highlighted along with the tunic, indicating they're part of the same element. This creates a bit of extra work for us. Go back to the right side selection panel and choose Polygon, the option next to Element. We're going to start cutting away the pieces of the mesh that we don't need. Start with the areas furthest away from the belt that we're isolating. Highlight them, and then press the Delete key. Continue doing that until we've isolated the area around the belt. Now we're going to adjust our wireframe views so we can get a better look at the belt area. It may not seem so initially, but when working with 3D, having multiple view angles of your object is extremely important to avoid cutting or editing parts that you don't intend to. To position objects within each view, you can use the mouse scroll wheel to zoom, or mouse wheel click to move an object around in the window. Now that we've cut away most of the unrelated pieces of the mesh, we're going to focus on the area immediately around the belt, which requires a more precise approach. Start cutting away small groups or individual polygons in the outer edges. You can use the box in the upper right corner of the render window to manipulate and rotate the mesh. Keep an eye on your wireframe views as well to ensure you're only selecting the polygons you intend to and not cutting into the belt itself. Fortunately, the geometry of this belt is mostly separate from the rest of the outfit, so we don't need to split any polygons, just remove the extra ones. You can use Control-click to select multiple polygons at once, and Alt-click to deselect polygons. Continue removing any extra geometry until only the belt is left. After you've isolated the belt, double-check the mesh to make sure you don't have any leftover or floating polygons, and that you didn't accidentally clip any pieces of the belt itself. Now's a good time to save your work in progress. It's a good habit to get into if you aren't already, and you can use this file to revert the belt back to a vanilla state if you make any mistakes later. I recommend saving your work in progress as a Max file so that you don't have to worry about any of the changes exporting it as a NIF will cause. Now I'll show you how to add additional geometry to your mesh. In this case, we'll be adding a thin ring around the inside of the belt to minimize clipping for users assembling mashups in NIFscope. Back on the right side panel, make sure your selection method is still set to Polygon, and then go to Edit Geometry and select the Create option. It'll make things easier for you if you set the render window view to be completely top-down. You'll notice after entering Create mode that all of the mesh's vertices are now visible. To begin creating our new polygons, or more specifically tries, find the vertex you'd like to start with. Click on it, then create a new vertex in the empty space by clicking into it. Click the next vertex to form a triangle, and finally click your starting vertex again. An important factor in creating new tries is that the order you create the edges will determine which way it faces, which indicates which side of the try is textured. The easiest way to know which way it's facing is by the color of the try when it's highlighted. This try I've created here is actually facing backwards. The darker red color shows that it's facing away from my current view angle. There are a few ways to correct a backward try, but since this is the first one we're creating, it's probably easier to just recreate it correctly by reversing the order we connect the vertices. As you can see, the bright red side is now facing outward, and our texture will do the same. Now we're going to adjust the positioning of the new vertex we created. While it looks fine from the top view, if you have a look at the side views, it's actually far below our mesh. We're going to save some time manually positioning it by using the coordinates of one of the existing vertices as a reference. Enable vertex selection on the right side panel, and then click on one of the belt's existing vertexes. Right-click your selected vertex, and in the context menu, select Move. We can now see the coordinates for this vertex below the current render window. We want to borrow its z-axis value for our new vertex. Highlight it and Ctrl-C to copy it. Now we want to apply that value to our new vertex. Select it and paste the number we copied from the other vertex into the z-axis. Our vertex is now in line on the z-axis, and we just need to manually adjust its positioning a bit. We don't want this extra ring to be extremely thick, so we'll bring it much closer to the base belt. I'm also going to move it more in line with the original vertices on the y-axis, so that our next try can interlock with this one. This pattern will produce a fairly smooth but low poly ring. Just like we created the first polygon, we'll create its partner. Enable polygon selection on the right side menu, and this time use our new vertex as one of the 3 points we connect. Now that we have more than one polygon on our new shape, we can use a different method to correct it if we create a try facing backwards. Exit create mode by right-clicking, and then select our new try. On the right side menu, scroll down to the section called Surface Properties, and then click Unify. Now we'll adjust the positioning of the newest vertex just like before, starting with the z-axis. Going forward, we use the same z-axis value we copied the first time to save time, and go back and make any minor adjustments we need later. Enable vertex selection, select only the newest vertex, and then paste the coordinates. Manually adjust the position to be in line with the previous vertex we created, and with the original belt vertices. 2 new tries we've created should make a neat little box after you're done adjusting. Now we'll repeat this process along the edge of the belt, though from here on we only need to create a new vertex for every other try we create, like in this example here. We've now created something that passes for a small edge on the inner part of the belt, but like I mentioned before, we'll want to do a little bit more cleanup to make sure everything looks neat and that these new vertices match up with their friends. If we rotate the object a bit, we can see that some of the vertices are actually above the edge of the belt, which would allow them to be seen if used in an outfit. We want all these to be lower, so we'll adjust them. If you somehow change modes, you can enable adjustment by right-clicking a vertex and selecting Move, then using the widget or the arrows near the XYZ values below the render window. Some areas are also sticking a bit far out on the X and Y axis, as we can see in the top left wireframe view, so I'm going to adjust these too. Ideally, we want to get everything distributed smoothly across each axis, creating a fairly uniform circle. After finishing our tweaks, it's a good time to save, both to ensure we don't lose our progress, and so we have something to fall back on in case we manage to break anything later. You've probably noticed our new geometry has a pretty bizarre texture. That's because we haven't properly UV mapped it. A UV map is what tells programs how the texture is supposed to lay out on the model. Near the top of the right side menu, you'll notice a drop-down menu called Modifier List. Click it and scroll all the way down to the bottom and select Unwrap UVW. Set your selection type to polygon and then highlight all the new geometry we've created. If for some reason you cannot highlight it, you'll need to go back to the editable mesh on the right side menu and first select the new polygons there. After selecting our new geometry, click Open UV Editor on the right side menu. The shapes in this window make up the current UV map of our selection. In the top right corner, you can use the drop-down menu to select the base texture for the mesh if you have your NIF plugin set up correctly. For a simple shape like this, and because manual mapping is a bit more in-depth than this tutorial, we can mostly automate the UV map creation. At the top of the UV editor, select Mapping and then Normal Mapping. You'll have a few options here, and we'll just give a few a try to see what works best and what's easiest to work with. This option more or less maps it in the correct shape, with a few broken pieces, so we'll just manually touch those up. Select the loose pieces by clicking and dragging over them. By default, the Move tool is selected, so drag it into place, and then switch to the Rotate tool to adjust it roughly into place. If needed, you can also use the other transformative tools on the top bar to tweak your UV. Finally, we're going to scale this down to be more relative to the size of the texture. When doing proper UV mapping, you'd position this to be more seamless with the base texture, but I'm just going to leave it over here for now. Our mesh is now complete except for one setting, the Dismember Skin instance. This is specific to equipable items as it tells the game which slot the item should use when equipped. The current Dismember Skin instance should be at the top of our modifier list. However, this one will be faulty due to our significant changes to the mesh's geometry, so we want to completely delete this one and recreate it. After deleting the original, open the modifier dropdown and find the BS Dismember Skin instance and click it. With the Dismember Skin instance active, highlight the entire mesh, and then on the Skin partition dropdown, select Skyrim Main Body. We're selecting Main Body for this because this piece is intended to be attached to a full outfit, but if you wanted to assign it elsewhere, that would be fine too. We're finally ready to export and test our NIF. Open the 3DS icon menu in the very top left corner and select Export. Select the folder you want to save it to, select NIF from the file type dropdown at the bottom, give your file a name, and then click Save. You'll be prompted to select a variety of settings for exporting your NIF. Use the settings here for the least amount of tweaking you'll need to do later. After saving our new NIF, open it up in NIF Scope. The lighting shader properties exported by 3DS are typically faulty. They really match the original and can occasionally cause crashes. So we want to replace that entirely with one we know works. In this case, we're just going to use the vanilla mesh this object came from, but any item of a similar type will work. Expand the Nitri shape on your vanilla mesh, find the lighting shader property, right-click it, and select Copy Branch. On your new NIF, do the same, except this time delete the branch. Highlight the Nitri shape for the new NIF, right-click and select Paste Branch. If all has gone well, your mesh should now be functional. Save your changes in NIF Scope. Now we're going to test our new mesh in game by setting it as a new, and slightly hilarious, armor in the creation kit. Since I've already got a plugin created for doing this testing, I'm going to quickly duplicate an armor add-on to use for this. Open the armor add-on, give it a relevant name, and set the model to your new NIF. This needs to be in your Skyrim data folder, which is a step I kind of missed showing here. Now we'll create the equipable version of the armor that we'll use to test. I'm making a quick copy of another chest equipped item, giving it a unique name, and then adding the new armor add-on we just created to it. Save the plugin in the creation kit, and we're ready to load our mesh in-game. Once the game is open, load a testing profile, or open the console and type COC Riverwood. Now that we have a character to test with, we need to add the new item to our inventory. Open the console and type help item name, so in this example, Modular. Find your new item and note its ID. Then type player.add_item and the item ID to receive a copy of it. Open your inventory, find it, and equip it. The main thing we're looking out for, aside from whether the item appears correctly in-game or not, is that the weighting looks fine. For most items based on vanilla meshes, manually adjusting the weights is not usually necessary, but since we added some additional geometry, there is a possibility of it needing to be reweighted. To test this effectively, you need to move the character into a variety of poses and motions, and verify that the mesh deforms correctly. When weights are faulty, the mesh will deform in very strange ways, often sticking to limbs or polygons flapping around on their own. If nothing looks terribly broken here, you've succeeded and your mesh is good to go.